Hey, what's up everybody? Eric from Orchestra Gold here. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. I wanted to share an episode of a podcast that I just listened to yesterday. And it's almost like an investigative journalistic piece on the vinyl reissue market. And it's exceedingly well done. This is great reporting, great journalism, and it's in an area that's really close to home for me because it's this whole vinyl reissue situation. And if I had to sum up why I want to share this, it's because this is a space where they're actually talking about how power impacts the music industry, specifically the vinyl reissue world. And let's be honest, there aren't a lot of places where we talk about how power and music interact with each other. You know, power, racial hierarchy, colonialism, all of it is discussed. And this episode is really about putting a lens on that. The show is Afropop Worldwide, and it's hosted by Georges Collinet. Morgan Greenstreet does some of the reporting, and they have a couple of other people involved too. I love how they're really interviewing a lot of people and letting them speak for themselves and letting the nuances of the story come through. They talk to record label owners, they talk to artists. There's just a lot of dynamics to unpack here. And it's not really a case where there's an easy villain. Let me go back to my own experience for a second. There's certainly instances I've been familiar with where artists don't get their fair shake. Artists who've been recorded in Mali. And it's also true that there's a knowledge gap and a pretty big power gap between the people who often record these artists or produce them and the artists themselves. And this gap can result in miscommunication, hurt feelings, people not understanding each other. And yeah, sometimes power shows up in ways that are directly exploitative. And this story really paints the complexity of the picture in a real light. If you are a person who loves to collect old vinyl from Africa, you have to listen to this episode. And if you've stuck around the Orchestra Gold ecosystem long enough, you know that talking about justice is really important. And part of that is recognizing power dynamics and how they show up here and not just letting them go. That's really the reason that I'm sharing this. Maybe it'll encourage you, maybe it'll encourage me to do a bit more research when we purchase certain vinyl records, thinking about where those records come from and whether the labels are doing a good job of sourcing them ethically. And the last thing I'll reiterate is just that there's no easy answers to any of this. You know, getting old African artists in front of new audiences in the West, is that good for them? I remember a couple of years ago we opened for Hailu Mergia, and he's one of the artists that they talk about in this episode. And I got to meet him and speak with him for a little bit. And I'll be honest, he was just glowing because of the appreciation that he's getting now in the West. Is that good for him? I think it probably is. And we also have to consider the implications of racial hierarchy, power, or we're unknowingly going to be recreating past histories of appropriation and exploitation. So what folds out for me from all of this is really just a series of questions. Am I giving back in ways that are generative to the place where I'm taking music from? Am I staying in right relationship? Am I staying humble and centering people other than myself? I have a hard time with that one sometimes. Oh, and then finally, am I thinking about the practices of the record label that I'm buying from? That's an area where I could personally, I think, do better. Okay, so without further ado, go listen to this full episode. It's called Reissued African Vinyl in the 21st Century from Afropop Worldwide.